So there's some interesting developments around Obamacare. And I know a lot of people on the show, Ryan, after accurately represent your view and Crystal's that Obamacare is terrible and all of that. But the Trump administration right now is actually moving to try and kill Obamacare at the Supreme Court. Chris Wallace actually talked a little bit about it on Fox News Sunday. Let's take a listen.
Late Thursday night, around midnight, the Trump Justice Department filed a brief joining a number of state attorneys general in calling for the Supreme Court to overturn, to end Obamacare, which they wouldn't even take up until next October and wouldn't be decided before the election. So it's not like it's going to happen. Meanwhile, right now, because of the pandemic and people losing jobs and losing their health insurance, 500,000 more people since March have signed up for Obamacare. Does it make political sense? I understand why the president and Republicans don't like Obamacare, but does it make political sense at this point to double down on killing Obamacare?
Well, Chris, I'm glad you asked. The answer is no, it doesn't. And it's kind of amazing, isn't it, Ryan? Because I'm reading this strategy, and the Trump administration is basically banking on this idea that Obamacare is super unpopular. And I mean, that is empirically true. But what they're not banking on is that nobody trusts them whenever it comes to health care because they screwed it up in the very first month of the. I mean, this is something I rip Republicans for all the time. And you know this. They banked their whole opposition to Obama on repeal and replace. And they passed all these fake repeal plans whenever they had control of the House, being like, look, we've got the blueprint. We'll pass it on day one. So Trump believes them, comes into office, and Paul Ryan's like, we're ready to go. They're like, great, let's go. And then they can't even pass a bill. Yeah. It's just utter craziness. And now, I don't know what it is, but Trump seems to have internalized this rhetoric as well, being like, look, Obamacare is super unpopular in the middle of a pandemic, you know, employer-sponsored health insurance, Pelosi's bailing people out with COBRA subsidies and all this other nonsense. And yet Biden, I cannot think of anything politically better for him right now. Axios reporting this week that his entire message of the week is savior of Obamacare, savior of Obamacare. Obviously, people on the left are like, you know, they're going at it and be like, no, we need Medicare for all and all that. But Biden looks like the more politically reasonable one, right, at this time. And it's just another example of, I think, Republicans shooting themselves in the foot because of ideology.
Yeah, and my view on Obamacare is probably similar to a majority of the country, which is that Obamacare is terrible, Obamacare is a mess, but Obamacare is better than no
healthcare.
Obamacare.
Right.
Which is why Republicans, when they started going after Obamacare, came up with the slogan, repeal and replace. They figured they would get to the replace part later, and like you said, they never came up with the replacement that was going to be adequate. Trump has said, we're going to save pre-existing conditions.
Yes.
Because he understands
that's the number one most important part of
that. And the 26 and under, you could do that easily. But the problem with saving pre-existing conditions is that requires an entire infrastructure around it. You can't just mandate that private insurers can't take into account pre-existing conditions when charging for insurance without then regulating and subsidizing the price of insurance. Because with that one small intervention, you've destroyed the market. And so now that you've destroyed it, you now have to come in and save it. They don't want to come in and save it. They want to destroy the market, but then let the free market ride, which then all of the insurers basically go out of business. That nobody's mandated, nobody's subsidized, nobody has to. It just doesn't.
It's a mess.
You can't do pre-existing conditions without doing universal health care, some type of public option, some type of regulated from the top insurance exchanges. Like there's just policy-wise no other way to do it.
Right.
Trump doesn't care about policy, so he's never absorbed that. Republicans can't get to a place where they can do all of those things because ideologically they're just not there. They'd be smarter to just leave it alone right now.
Yes, exactly. No, my main thing is I'm like, why are you doing this? They're affirmatively saying we want to nuke Obamacare. As Chris Wallace points out, it's not going to happen until next October. You may not even be in government then. But they're affirmatively putting it as a political football, saying, no, we think this is going to be an issue in the election. This just smacks of something Mitt Romney would have done, right? This smacks of a Romney administration. And you're like, Trump almost ran to Hillary's left on healthcare. And he was like, no, we're gonna keep everybody, we're gonna protect our seniors. He was running against the flaws in Obamacare, which everybody hates, and against Medicaid and Medicare, which of course, we've covered here. how Medicaid, how nursing homes and all these other people are bilking Medicaid and just screwing their patients over because to game the dollar system. That's the part that everybody hates, right? It's not it's not having Obamacare. Whatever they want, healthcare, they just want it to be better. I also generally consider the axiom of when you try to screw with people's health care, you lose. Right. Even if you're trying to expand it. Obama, right? Dramatic losses, 2010. Clinton, 1994. Yeah. So we look at something like this and you're like, just don't touch it. It's like going forward and trying to put another political football forward. While, 40 million people lost their health insurance? Or something, 26 million or something because of employer-sponsored health insurance? Just seems like political madness. I truly don't understand it.
So it's so politically idiotic in the short term that you kind of have to look to a long-term goal that might be accomplished here. And there you can go into the kind of conservative legal movement. And then you could start to see, okay, what's motivating them to continue to push this? And then you start to see it's not necessarily just about Obamacare here. What the conservative legal movement wants to do is undermine the ability of the federal government to do this expansionist stuff like Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, deindustrializing the fossil fuel industry, the kinds of things that the left wants to do, wants to see pushed through Congress. The kind of right wing of the legal world is saying, well, let's figure out a way that once that's pushed through Congress, we can undermine it. And if we can establish the intellectual underpinnings of that undermining ahead of time, then we undermine the political motivation.
I'm glad that you said that. We've covered this a lot here recently on the show, which is that essentially the conservative legal movement exists for one purpose, to take care of big business and to be anti-regulatory. That's their only purpose. Social conservatives, screw you. We pretend that we'll help you out, but when the push comes to shove, we're not going to take care of you. Same thing whenever it comes to any other conservative interest. But the one thing that they will always take care of is corporations. There's no question. As I covered here, the Appalachian Trail pipeline gets greenlit at the same time the civil rights case happens. You think? Go ask any Trump voter, especially the evangelicals who voted for Trump. They don't care about the Appalachian pipeline. Okay, right. And so really what it is that their conservative legal movement, as you said, has created this entire ideology around just undermining the federal government because they don't believe in public policy. And they want to push that for this explicit purpose. And this is, again, I want to highlight this because this is the outgrowth of what cancerous ideology leads you to. Political malpractice. Nobody in this country wants to see Obamacare gone right now. Maybe 15% of the population. Everybody else is just like, you know what? Look, I think it's a terrible system, but we got this coronavirus thing and like all of that. We can litigate it when we're out of this mess. And yet, ideology leads you down this path. And I just think it's another case of, same with the lack of fiscal response, they're just screwing themselves over.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really have no other words to describe it. But we're going to have more Rising for you after this.